Hello, my name is Mary Jane Stidham, and I'm a medical assistant of Dr. Wasim Haq and a dietetic intern at Texas Women's University. Today, I'll be going over carbohydrates and carbohydrate counting. Carbohydrates are one of the three main nutrients we must consume for energy. The other two are proteins and fats, and together these are called macronutrients. Simply put, carbohydrates are made of sugar units called monosaccharides. Because of this, carbohydrates have a direct and dominant effect on blood glucose. When we consume foods with carbohydrates, our body breaks them down into these single units of sugar so they can be used for energy. We have just discussed that carbohydrates are made up of single sugar molecules called monosaccharides. There are three main monosaccharides: glucose, which is the most common and the main source of energy for the body; fructose, which is commonly found in fruits; and galactose, which is found in milk and dairy products. When two of these monosaccharides are connected, they become disaccharides. This makes sense because mono means one and di means two. The two main disaccharides are sucrose and lactose. Sucrose has a molecule each of glucose and fructose and is found in table sugar. Lactose is made up of galactose and glucose and is found in dairy. Polysaccharides are made up of multiple sugar units. Poly means many. Often, these are very long or branched with complex structures. Examples of polysaccharides include cellulose and starch, both found in plant sources. When we consume foods with carbohydrates, they begin to be broken down in the mouth. After passing through the esophagus and the stomach, the carbohydrates are broken down into their two-unit form, called disaccharides, in the intestine. As food continues moving through the intestines, the carbohydrates are eventually broken down into their single unit form, monosaccharides. Once they are this small, they can finally be absorbed by the body. From this point onwards, we'll simply call these units glucose. Once glucose enters the blood, it's transported to tissues and cells. Normally, our pancreas produces a hormone called insulin when this happens. Insulin is necessary for glucose to enter the cells. Once insulin allows glucose into a cell, it can be used to produce energy. Extra glucose is then stored for later use. As you can see here, carbohydrates come from a variety of foods. There are three different types of food that provide carbohydrates: sugars, starch, and fiber. Foods in the sugar category include different fruits, desserts, soda, juice, and candy. You may notice that these foods taste good, but they cause blood sugar to rise very fast. The reason it rises so quickly is because sugary foods are mainly made up of simple sugars or mono and disaccharides. Simple sugars are digested and processed very quickly by the body. On the other hand, starches take longer to digest because they have a complex structure. As a result, blood sugar rises slowly after you consume starches, unless the starches have been refined. We'll discuss refined starches in the next few slides. Fiber basically is non-digestible, so its effect on glucose levels is minimal. As we just discussed, the complexity of structure of these carbs determines how easily our body processes them and how fast they are converted to simple sugars. You can see here starches have a more complex structure than simple sugar, so naturally it takes the body longer to digest it. Because of this, blood sugars rise slowly when starch is consumed. Since sugary foods can make your blood sugar rise really fast, they can make your blood sugar harder to control. Starches and fibers are the best carbs for blood sugar control as they raise glucose levels gradually. Starches are the most common type of carb. Some starches are digested rapidly and some slowly. When you choose starches, try and go for vegetables and whole grain breads and pasta that provide energy along with vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Unfortunately, many processed starches found on the shelves in our grocery stores are highly refined and may be less suitable for blood sugar control. Now, you hear a lot about fiber being good for you, but what exactly is it? Basically, these are plant carbohydrates that we can't digest. As a result, they're largely undigested. There are two kinds: soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber improves blood sugar control because it dissolves into the water in the intestines, which slows down digestion. This kind of fiber can be found in fruits, vegetables, legumes, oats, and more. Insoluble fiber, on the other hand, doesn't dissolve into water, but instead pulls water into the colon. Studies show this may help with insulin resistance. This other kind of fiber comes from fruits with edible peels or seeds, whole grain products, bran cereals, and brown rice. Both types of fiber are beneficial to gut health because they increase the amount of stool and cause it to exit faster. Soluble fiber is also helpful for reducing cholesterol. A healthy diet includes a variety of fiber sources. You should be eating around 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. To get enough fiber in your diet, try to choose whole grain products over refined grains and get at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Consuming the peel of fruits is also important. Fruit juice doesn't provide the same amount of fiber as whole fruit, especially if that fruit has a peel or a skin. Another good tip for increasing fiber intake is sprinkling oat bran or wheat germ on meals like salad and cereal. Sadly, on average, we in the US only consume about 15 grams of fiber every day. One of the healthiest options for starches is whole grain foods. Whole grains are the entire seed of the plant, including 3 parts. Bran, which is the outside of the seed and contains fiber and B vitamins. Endosperm, which contains the carbohydrates. And the germ, which contains healthy fats. Refined grains, however, are the most common type of grain sold in the US. During processing, a refined grain has the bran and the germ removed. As a consumer, you should watch out for refined grains because they lack the extra nutrients found in the outside of the seed as well as the inside. Be careful, some foods are advertised as whole grain but contain other added sugars and refined grains. You should be consuming 5 to 8 ounces of grains every day, and at least half of this should be whole grains. A helpful tip would be to check the fiber content on the nutrition label. If there are less than 3 grams of fiber per serving, the product is not technically whole grain. Earlier, we mentioned that carbs directly affect blood glucose. If we can estimate how many carbs we consume, it can help us balance our blood sugar and our weight. Now, let's see how we measure carbs. Earlier, we mentioned that carbs directly affect blood glucose. This means that if we can estimate how many carbs we consume, we should be able to balance our blood sugar and our weight. So how can we do that? If you're a beginner at carb counting, the hand method is a great place to start. This method is a simple way to measure carb servings. 1 serving of carbs should be about the size of your fist. For example, a small apple, a 1/3 cup of cooked rice, or a small scoop of mashed potatoes. Bulkier items like vegetables, crackers, and chips can be measured with an open hand. The carb counting or serving size method is a more advanced and accurate way to do this. Because it's more precise, many patients with diabetes use this method to adjust the amount of insulin they take. In diabetes meal planning, 1 serving of food with carbohydrates has about 15 grams of carb. For example, 15 grams could be a slice of bread, half a hamburger bun, or a cup of yogurt. This is an extremely useful method to keep fluctuating blood sugars under control. If you would like more examples, there are many carb counting apps available for you to use. These are only 4 of the many apps used for carb counting. Find one that is the right fit for you. Here we have MyFitnessPal, Calorie King, Figwe, and Cornerstones for Care. One of the most important things you can do is learn how to read a nutrition facts label. The first thing to do is check the serving size at the top. That way, the amount you actually eat can be used to determine the rest of the values. Next, you would count the total carbohydrates. Divide that number by 15 to determine the total number of carb servings. For example, this label says 17 grams, which is about 1 serving of carbs. If the total carbohydrates in 1 serving was 30 grams, you would count it as 2 servings of carbs. It's really important to note that underneath total carbohydrate, you'll find dietary fiber and sugars. These do not need to be added in since they're already accounted for in the total. Not all carbs impact blood glucose equally. The glycemic index is a measure that can help classify carbs by the rate at which they affect blood sugar levels. Foods that have a lower glycemic index number affect the blood sugar slower than foods with a high glycemic index number. This chart depicts which foods are higher or lower on the glycemic index. In general, the lower glycemic foods will have more fiber, be more nutrient dense, and cause blood sugar levels to rise more gradually. Examples of low glycemic foods include whole grains, beans, peas, lentils, oats, and milk. You can see that a lot of what is consumed in the US, such as white bread, candy, and cereal, are high on the glycemic index. Now that you understand how to estimate carb amounts, how do you know how much to eat? Generally, the recommended amount is 30 to 75 grams of carbs per meal. However, many different factors like body size, body shape, exercise, and genetics can affect how much you need. We recommend seeing a registered dietitian to get recommendations that are tailored to your needs. You may think if you have diabetes that you should avoid carbs at all costs, but this simply isn't true. Carbs just need to be balanced throughout the day. Let's look at a meal plan for someone on a 1,500 calorie diet. While some people may need more than 1,500 calories, this is just an example. When looking at the plan, you'll notice that carbohydrates are spread throughout the day. Meals each have 3 servings of carbs, and snacks have 1 or 2. Most of these carbs are complex as well, from whole grains to fibrous vegetables, as well as starch and dairy. Now I'll be showing you how to plan an appropriate healthy meal using the MyPlate method. MyPlate was developed by dietitians and is used by experts all over the world. You need to pick a plate that's about 9 inches in diameter. The first step is filling half the plate with leafy greens and fruits. Examples of leafy greens could be spinach or kale. Examples of fruits could be oranges, grapes, or apple slices. Next, you'll fill a quarter of your plate with a source of protein. Make sure you watch out for fat content when you're picking your protein, and choose something like a lean meat, nuts, seeds, or even tofu. Next, you'll fill in the remaining quarter of the plate with a source of carbohydrate like a starch or a grain. Make sure you choose something like whole grain pasta, whole grain bread, sweet potato, or rice. You can also add in a source of dairy, such as a small cup of milk or a cup of yogurt. If you're carb counting, make sure you include dairy and fruit in the count. You may have heard that carbs are bad for you because of the popularity of the keto diet or the Atkins diet. But this is simply not true. Carbs are really important for you because they provide energy and essential nutrients that can't be found anywhere else. In addition to this, a low-carb diet will be really hard to follow in the long run, so if you choose to follow this, we recommend seeing a registered dietitian. In summary, if you have diabetes, you don't need to avoid carbs. If you choose the right ones in the right amounts, you can still enjoy carbs every day. I hope this presentation was interesting and that you feel more equipped to go out and plan healthy meals. Thank you and good luck. This video is for informational purposes only, and it's not intended to serve as a substitute for consultation and medical treatment. Please contact your healthcare provider about any question pertaining to your specific condition. They will be able to provide you with answers and accommodations that are specific and accurate for you. Thank you.